Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Thompson of Everyday Expressions. Thanks so much for joining me today. I am so excited to share this artistic card that I created for a brand new series on my YouTube channel called Art Ish. And it's a study of artistic and cultural styles of art that we can apply into our card making. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. But let's get started on the card, and then when I'm doing some ink blending, we'll go back and talk about the whole concept. I've begun by taking a piece of 5.5 by 5.5 inch cardstock, and I am stamping the bamboo stamps from, let me see the name of this stamp set. It is called Never Give Up from Altenew. This card actually features mainly products from Altenew, and I created it as a bonus card for the March Mindfulness 2024 virtual retreat. I was an instructor for that and created a couple of other cards, and I was so inspired that I wanted to create a couple of other cards that reminded me of artistic styles that I admire. So this card features styles in the historical Japanese and Chinese style of ink painting and calligraphy. And so that was the whole idea and inspiration behind this. I had so much fun using the Lily Pad Dreams 3D embossing folder and the layered stencils, and then the Calming Koi from the kit in the March Mindfulness Retreat. They are not available yet in the shop, but I'm sure they will be soon. They always put them in the store later on. So you'll definitely want to refer back to this video when you have those supplies, or I always encourage you to shop your stash. You might have something else, not even related to, the bamboo or anything, but maybe you have koi stamps from another company and you can take some things from this video. And I just always encourage you to shop your stash and reinvent things or use what you already have. So back to this, you'll see that I stamped the bamboo using the Altenew stamp wheel, and I stamped that in the Obsidian black pigment ink just because I love how crisp and clear, and it once you heat set it, it stays perfectly, it won't smear, and it just is gives a really nice bold black stamp. Then you see, I kind of moved the cardstock to get the 3D impression exactly where I want in the folder. And as long as you have a wide enough die cutting machine, and can run through carefully without kind of bumping it or anything, you can maneuver that. Don't think you just have to stick it straight in there and, it has to be like that every time. Definitely think outside the box and move your paper to get those embossed images exactly where you want them. So then I'm using the sticky mat of the stamp wheel to hold down my paper and my stencils. And you see I'm using the crisp dye inks from Altenew in the Gentleman's Gray. And I'm using my favorite mini blender brushes. And I begin with the lighter color and then I move through to the darker. And I think one of the most important tips in ink blending for this artistic style card is that you have very high, bright white highlights and you have very deep, dark shadows. And so that's where you begin with the lighter grays, but don't don't be afraid to leave white space, because I think the white space is just as important as the shading space. And it's what really makes it look dramatic. So I just use the stencils, and I also encourage you to always refer to the guide on the back of the Altenew layered stencils. Sometimes it can be a little confusing, and the guide will definitely help you determine how you line up the stencils. So I'm going here, and here I've moved to the darker colors. I kind of concentrate that on the outside so that I keep those highlights. And then these are the low lights, the shadows. And like I said, that's where the drama comes into play. So I just move it around and I ink all of the lily pads. And you'll see in a moment, I pull it up and I decide, it's still not striking enough. So I bring in the jet black crisp dye ink, and I ink blend that just in some of the darkest areas to really give that contrast of the lights and the darks. After I do that, you'll see I move on to the lotus flowers, and I use some pinks and reds for those. And I will say the lotus flowers get a little tricky on the stencil, so you just have to refer to the guide and move it around until you really get it lined up. One other tip you see that I keep showing here as I'm ink blending is you'll want to use some sticky notes or a mask at the bottom of your stencil so that you don't accidentally get some ink or ink blending onto the paper where you don't want it. And there you see I'm bringing in the dark jet black ink. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about where the inspiration for this new series for Cardmakers came from. It was actually from this retreat in using these products, because I created 2 bonus cards, and one was in the Andy Warhol style, the 4 blocks with the very bright primary kind of colors. And I created that one, and then I had this inspiration. I love Japanese and Chinese classic ink art, and I love the grays and the blacks. But then in many if you look at many of the historical art from those cultures, they will bring in pops of color. There's beautiful reds and a lot of times pinks. They'll have cherry blossoms. And I know they borrowed culturally. I'm not an art history scholar by any means, but I just know what I like. And I love the cultures of Chinese and Japanese art and this particular kind of look. And so here's my story time. I used to be a teacher, and an elementary teacher, and I loved to do read alouds. And one story that I often liked to read to my students was a children's book called Ish by Peter Reynolds. And in this story, Ramon loves to draw. He draws and draws and draws, and he'll draw anything and everything. And his older brother one day makes fun of him, and he said, "That doesn't look anything like what you're drawing." And it really crushed Ramon, and he crumpled up the paper and he threw it away, and it really kind of dashed his love for drawing. And how many times does that even happen to us? We're trying to create a card, or we're trying to draw something, and we just can't do it like someone else, and it really kind of dampens our spirits, and we almost lose the joy in just creating the art because it doesn't look real, or it doesn't look like someone else's. And so I wanted to take the idea of these classic cultural styles of Japanese and Chinese ink painting and ink washes and calligraphy, and apply those ideas to card making. And so I hope to create some more videos in the future and inspire you to create art that doesn't look exactly like it's supposed to be. And in the story, Ramon's younger sister sees something and she said, well, it may not look like a vase, but it looks vase-ish. In other words, kind of like a vase. And that's all that matters. And he starts looking around her room, and she's hung all these pictures that he's drawn, and he sees all these pictures that are house-ish and sun-ish. And it may not be exact, but it's his version, and it's ish. It's kind of like that. And so I just always loved that story. And I just want to inspire all of you to create your cards and create your art, and don't make it someone else's. Make it your own. And if it's not a perfect lily pad, or it's not a perfect koi, it can be koi-ish. And it doesn't have to be Japanese art or Chinese art. It can be art-ish, right? And we can apply that to our card making. And so that's where the whole inspiration for this new series has come about. And I don't know how often I'll have a card for you or a video, but I really would like to explore this and applying some of these different historical, some of the art masters and their techniques and different cultures. There's so much beautiful art in the world. And if we can bring it into our card making and inspire, if that inspires us to create something beautiful, it doesn't have to be exactly right, but it can be kind of like it in ish, right? So, here I am that's the whole concept behind this whole series that I've started, and I hope you enjoy it because I've had so much fun, and I think this card was the perfect way to begin. So I've got all of the ink blending done. You saw all of that, and now I've moved on to the Calming Koi layered die set. And once again, this is an example of I would refer to the guide, and it definitely helps in figuring out how to create these koi. I begin with the largest kind of background die, and I die cut that out of Lawn Fawn iridescent vellum. It gives this beautiful pearly accent to the vellum, and it's so pretty. It actually looks like they're little translucent fins on the koi. Then I die cut all of the pieces out of white cardstock. And you see now I'm just ink blending with pinks. And here's the other thing with these koi. Do not get overwhelmed by the little tiny stamps for their spots on the koi. I have to tell you, I do not even refer to the guide, and my fish can be fish-ish, and they don't have to be Altenews perfect way of stamping them. I do not even look at where they place the spots. I put them on a block, I ink it up, and I just place some spots anywhere I want on the fish. There is no right or wrong way to do this. And you'll see I ink blended in pink, and then I kind of moved up to more of the reds, and I'm just randomly stamping those spots. There's also a layer of the koi that you stamp their little eyeballs, and then you layer them up. And the base is where I've used the vellum, and then you layer the layer with the eyeballs, and then the next layer would be that little part with all of the spots. And the final layer is the top fin that goes down the middle of their body. So you'll see I just keep ink blending and kind of adding ink where I think it looks nice. And now I'm going to adhere it. I will say I love to use the sticky mat of the Altenew stamp wheel because it holds those pieces in place. Then I can use my tweezers and pick up the pieces and then stick it down on the next one. I just am very careful not to get any glue on my mat, but I could clean it off if I get some. But I just love that it kind of grips it and makes it easy to do that. And you'll see there I had already stamped the little eyeballs, and then that's that top piece layering on top. How pretty are these koi in pinks and reds? I think they just really pop once we get them on the card. And I've created 3, that magical odd number of 3 for my card. And here you'll see I even decided to add a little bit of ink to that translucent vellum. I think it really gives a pretty effect on their fins when it's all layered up. And there's no, rhyme or reason to this, but I did leave the edges with no ink and the darker ink towards the base, so that it really would look like highlights at the edge of the fins. And then I'm layering all those pieces together. And then you'll see I add the top fin down the middle. So now, once again, I've got my inked background in the sticky mat, and I'm putting the sentiment from the Tranquil Greetings stamp set, and it's absolutely perfect, obviously, for it coordinates perfectly with the lily pads and koi. And I use my stamp wheel and that black obsidian ink to stamp that. I kind of tentatively placed my fish so I knew exactly where I wanted the sentiment to go. Heat set that. And now what I'm doing is I'm kind of figuring out where I want my fish to go and adding just a little shadow ink blending back behind them just to make them pop a little bit more and add a little bit more dimension in the card. So I just keep going in until I'm happy with how much I've got. And I will say, any supplies that you're looking for in the comments, or not the comments, but the description below the video, I do have a link to all supplies. And like I said, many of these exact supplies are not in the store yet, but I'm sure they will be in the future. And I'll go back and edit that when they are released. But if you're looking for ink colors or anything else like the stamp wheel, any information on that will be listed there. So now what I've done is I've created the card base with black cardstock. This is 6 by 6. And obviously 8.5 by 11 paper will not create a 6 by 6 card. So I always cut one that is 6.5 by 6 inches. And then the other one is 6 by 6. And then create a 1/2 inch kind of tab. I miter the corners. I put score tape on it. And then I place the other 6 by 6 panel on there, wrap that little tab around, and that'll be the back of the card. And now I've got a perfect 6 by 6 card base. I'm just going to place that on a white panel, and then I'll put that on my card base. I'll apply my koi, and there we go. We're almost finished. So I hope you've enjoyed this card and that you're inspired to create your own art-ish in someone else's style or an artistic style. Make your own art and be happy with it. And don't let anybody else steal your joy in your card making and in your art. Thank you so much for joining me today. And please like this video and subscribe so that you'll be notified when I have videos released in the future. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care, everyone.